There comes a time in every healing journey when you rise, when the fog clears, when your voice, once silenced, finds its thunder. You've done the work. You've stitched together your soul after it was torn by manipulation, gaslighting, and betrayal. You begin to live for yourself, not for approval, not for validation, not for fear. And just when the light within you begins to glow a little too brightly, they return, not with open arms, not with apology, but with one final trick, one final attempt to dim your flame, a desperate dance of shadows trying to eclipse your strength. Today, we uncover that last dirty trick a narcissist plays when they see that you've grown too strong to be controlled. Not out of curiosity, but out of necessity, because awareness is your greatest defense. Let's walk through it step by step. There is something haunting about the return of someone who once fractured your spirit. It doesn't come with thunder or warning. It comes quietly, like a shadow that slips through the door you thought you had sealed forever. When you have finally begun to taste peace, real, hard-earned, sacred peace, there emerges a knock. And on the other side is a familiar face, but not quite the same. Their eyes seem softer, their voice lower, their words shaped by humility. They say they've changed. They speak of growth, of sleepless nights filled with regrets, of the work they've done on themselves. They show you books, journals, therapy notes. It feels convincing. It sounds almost holy, but the danger is not in the return itself. It is in what they're wearing, the mask of transformation. Narcissists are not foolish. They are masterful illusionists. They understand the depth of your heart, the memories you still carry, the part of you that longs for closure or redemption. They do not return because they have changed. They return because you have. Your strength threatens them. Your silence wounds their ego. Your independence reminds them that you no longer orbit around their needs, and so they do not retreat. They adapt. They disguise themselves as the version you always wished they were. But it is not love. It is strategy. True transformation does not happen in the dark. It is not born out of missing someone or losing access. It is a long, brutal, internal process that involves disassembling the self, confronting shame, embracing humility, and seeking accountability. It cannot be rushed, and it cannot happen solely to get someone back. But the narcissist does not walk that path. Instead, they mimic the language of healing to unlock the door again. A woman once told the story of her ex-partner, a man who had emotionally drained her for years. After a painful breakup and months of silence, he showed up unannounced. He carried a leather-bound journal filled with words about pain, about realizations about her. She was cautious, but touched. She believed him. She let him in, thinking perhaps pain had finally taught him what love was supposed to be. Within 2 weeks, the shift happened. It was subtle at first. A passive-aggressive comment here, a cold silence there. And then it returned in full, the control, the gaslighting, the emotional neglect. Only now it was more dangerous, because now she didn't just have to fight him. She had to fight the part of her that felt foolish for believing again. She began to doubt her own growth. That is the real poison of this trick. It doesn't just reintroduce the narcissist. It attacks your trust in yourself. What makes this tactic so devastating is that it appeals to the most human parts of us: compassion, hope, the belief that people can change. And people can change, but not all people and not all at once. The narcissist doesn't return to build something new. They return to reclaim what they feel they lost: control, admiration, access. Their softness is not surrender. It is seduction. Their apology is not an awakening. It is bait. You must learn to see beyond the trembling voice and the eyes that glisten with rehearsed regret. You must hold fast to the truth your healing has revealed. You are not responsible for fixing someone who broke you. You do not owe your progress to the person who made you need it. So when they come back, because often they do, recognize that the costume may be different, but the soul underneath remains unchanged. And remember, not every knock deserves to be answered. Not every tear is true, not every return is redemption. Sometimes it's just a trap, dressed in tenderness. There is something deeply unsettling about realizing that the very qualities you were once criticized for lacking are now the ones you're being shamed for possessing. It's a strange reversal, and yet, predictably, it happens. When a narcissist sees you rising, when your spine straightens, your voice steadies, and your choices begin to reflect your growth rather than your fear, they do not respond with admiration. They respond with accusation, the traits they once tried to destroy. Your independence, your assertiveness, your clarity now become tools in their new attack, but they are not praised, they are weaponized. They begin with subtle phrases wrapped in nostalgia. You used to be different. They say, you were warmer before. Success has changed you. You don't need anyone anymore. To an outsider, these may sound like observations, but to the one who has survived their storm, these words are bullets aimed at your soul. What they are really saying is, you no longer bow to me. I can't access you the way I once could, and that threatens everything I built my ego on. A narcissist does not admire strength in others. They resent it, especially if that strength came from the ashes of their abuse. They perceive your healing not as triumph, but as betrayal. It is not that they truly believe you've become unkind or arrogant. It's that you've become inaccessible to manipulation. You've broken the cycle, and now they must reframe your growth as a flaw to maintain their illusion of superiority. And here lies the psychological trap. Many survivors of narcissistic abuse carry within them a wounded compass of self-worth. Conditioned through cycles of devaluation and intermittent reinforcement, they begin to associate being good with being agreeable, quiet, compliant. So when someone accuses them of being too bold, too distant, too self-reliant, it activates a familiar guilt, not because they are wrong, but because they were trained to feel wrong whenever they were not submissive. A young man once spoke of this moment in his journey. After finally setting boundaries with his toxic mother, boundaries that took years of therapy to implement, he was told he had become heartless. She said he was nothing like the sweet boy who always helped. But that sweet boy had been silently suffering, confused, manipulated, and drained. He had become a man not because he hardened, but because he healed. Yet in the eyes of the narcissist, his evolution was a betrayal, not a blessing. She couldn't see his growth without framing it as abandonment. What makes this so damaging is that it targets your identity. It doesn't scream at you. It whispers. It causes you to look inward, to doubt your own heart. Have I become too distant? Was I better when I was softer? It is a psychological regression that pulls at the roots of your old wounds. This is not by accident. It is by design. They will never say, I miss being able to manipulate you. They will say, you've changed. But those words are not evidence of your failure. They are confirmation of your transformation. The very fact that your strength provokes discomfort in them is proof that it's real. Healthy people do not guilt others for setting boundaries. Only those who benefited from your silence will fear your voice. You must understand this deeply. Your confidence is not cruelty. Your clarity is not arrogance. Your refusal to be controlled is not a character flaw. Do not apologize for doing what you were always meant to do. Become whole. Let them say you've changed. That's the goal. There is a certain cruelty that takes form not in fists or shouted words, but in whispers. A cruelty that moves through rooms you are not in, shaping perceptions you cannot touch. This is the silent assault of character assassination, the last weapon of the narcissist when all others have failed. When they cannot control your mind, your heart, your choices, they go after your name because your name carries weight. Your name is how others know you, how you move in the world. And if they cannot possess you, they will poison you in the eyes of others. It is not about truth, it is about power. The narcissist knows that reputation is currency, And once you are too strong to be manipulated directly, they attack what still might matter to you, how the world sees you. They begin small, carefully. They don't shout their lies. They plant them like seeds, watering them with feigned concern. I worry about them. They might say, something's not right lately. They frame your boundaries as coldness, your distance as instability, your healing as ego. What they say isn't always dramatic. It's often just enough to make people look at you sideways, just enough to invite doubt. And that doubt spreads quickly, especially in environments where your strength threatens the existing hierarchy. Like a workplace, like a family system, like a community of shared friends, the narcissist, fearing their own irrelevance, paints you in the very colors they once wore. Unpredictable, selfish, even cruel. They mirror their own darkness onto your skin and point the finger. Look, they say, at what they've become. It is not a cry for help. It is a calculated projection. One woman, a respected corporate executive, described how her narcissistic colleague began to undermine her reputation after she refused his personal advances. What followed was not an obvious campaign of hatred, but a subtle sabotage. Comments about her emotional fragility were whispered during meetings. Her decisions were questioned behind closed doors. She noticed how the mood shifted around her, how respect turned to suspicion, warmth to wariness. But she had kept records, emails, messages, notes from every meeting, and more than that, she had spent years building real relationships, not performative ones. When she finally brought the truth to light, it was undeniable. The story unraveled and his mask fell off. He didn't just lose credibility, he lost the illusion of being the victim. She had done what the narcissist could not predict. She had endured the storm without losing herself. There is something terrifying to a narcissist about someone who does not shatter. They rely on chaos to define them. They expect collapse. But when you do not break, when your silence speaks louder than their smear campaign, they panic. Because they know the lie has a lifespan and the truth has patience. They know that time in its quiet rhythm always reveals what drama hides, and that is why they rush to pollute your image before it can shine. But what they fail to understand is that truth, when rooted in integrity, cannot be erased by rumor. It may bend under the weight of gossip, but it will not break. This phase is painful, deeply so. It's one thing to be attacked by someone you once trusted. It's another to be misrepresented to those who once believed in you. You may feel the need to explain yourself, to defend your name at every corner. But know this, the more you chase a lie, the more legitimacy you give it. Let your actions be the answer. Let your consistency be your defense. Let your truth walk ahead of you in silence, because the narcissist's voice is loud, but short-lived. And yours, when grounded in authenticity, doesn't need to shout. It only needs to endure. There is a moment in every survivor's journey when the silence becomes sacred, when the absence of chaos begins to feel more healing than the illusion of reconciliation. And yet it is often in that very silence, when the narcissist senses they can no longer penetrate your mind directly, that they devise their most cunning detour, the use of mutual connections, not to reconnect, but to reach you through another body, another voice, another screen. Like a puppeteer behind the curtain, they pull invisible strings to orchestrate emotional triggers. This isn't mere coincidence. It is deliberate choreography. They understand that after all their games have failed, the only thread left that connects you is memory. So they activate it. They don't need to call or text. They simply appear in the spaces you once shared. A carefully timed photograph with someone new, arms draped just loosely enough to seem intimate, but ambiguous enough to deny intention. A cryptic quote posted online that echoes the words you once said in private. A mutual friend who suddenly, and with just the right amount of solemnity, tells you how heartbroken, they are without you. These gestures are not random, they are psychological warfare disguised as passive behavior. This tactic works because it mimics sincerity, it pretends to be unintentional, it relies on your empathy to fill in the gaps. You begin to wonder, was that really about me? Should I reach out? Do they miss me, or are they manipulating me again? And in that hesitation, in that internal tug-of-war between reason and emotion, the narcissist finds their opening, not to return, but to re-enter your mind. The complexity of this tactic lies in its invisibility. You cannot confront them without appearing paranoid. You cannot prove intent without sounding vengeful. That's the trap, and it's not an accident. It's architecture. It is designed to destabilize your progress without leaving fingerprints. And what's more, it uses people you might still care about, friends, family, or even online acquaintances, to serve as unknowing messengers of distress. They are not always aware they're being used, but the narcissist knows exactly what they are doing. They know that you may lower your guard if the message comes from someone familiar. They exploit those emotional bridges not to connect, but to collapse your peace from within. This behavior is deeply echoed in trauma psychology. Studies in emotional abuse recovery have shown that indirect contact, especially through curated social media or mutual circles, can trigger emotional flashbacks akin to PTSD. The brain does not always distinguish between physical and emotional proximity. A photo, a post, a name mentioned over coffee, it can all feel like a return of the storm. And if you're not grounded, you may find yourself reliving the pain, even though the person never spoke a word to you. But healing is not the absence of memory, it is the mastery of response. This is why silence, not confrontation, becomes your most powerful sword. You do not flinch, you do not chase, you do not offer them the feast of your reaction. Because you have learned that attention, whether loving or angry, is still currency to them and they are bankrupt without it. Let them perform, let them post, let them whisper, you do not owe them an audience. The path forward demands that you honor your growth more than their illusion, that you protect your energy the way you once protected them, that you understand that closure does not come from another apology. It comes from finally refusing to open the door. You are not cold, you are healed. You are not cruel, you are clear. And your silence is not emptiness. It is the sound of your power returning to you. When all other tactics fail, when manipulation no longer bends your will, when gaslighting no longer clouds your reality, when silence no longer draws you back, the narcissist turns to their most desperate and deceptive maneuver. They become the victim. This is not a genuine cry of suffering. It is a calculated performance designed to invert the narrative. The very person who drained you, who dismissed your needs, who turned your kindness into a leash, now stands before the world draped in sorrow, speaking with the voice of the wronged, the abandoned, the misunderstood. They cry louder than the one they wounded, because in their world, the one who cries loudest must be the most hurt. It is in this moment that the psychological reversal becomes nearly surreal. Suddenly you, the one who walked away for survival, for sanity, for life itself, are branded as the heartless one, the cold one, the toxic one. They do not return to take accountability. They return to accuse. Not to apologize, but to punish you with guilt. Their words cut not because they are true, but because they are shaped to mimic your own doubts. You've changed. You gave up on me. After all I did for you. These phrases are not expressions of grief. They are weapons forged in your past, hurled with perfect precision at the softest parts of your healing. And here is the cruelest part. Others may believe them. Family members who never saw what happened behind closed doors. Friends who only witnessed fragments of the story. Bystanders who were never there for the thousand quiet humiliations, the subtle put-downs, the chronic erosion of your sense of self. All they see now is the person sobbing in the open, devastated by your sudden cruelty. Because the narcissist does not break down in private, they perform in public. Their wounds are worn like costumes, their tears reserved for an audience. It is not remorse they seek, it is vindication. One man told the story of a family gathering where he finally enforced a long, overdue boundary with his mother, a woman who had controlled every aspect of his emotional life for decades. In front of relatives who knew nothing of the emotional manipulation he had endured, she burst into tears and declared that he no longer loved her. "What kind of son treats his mother like this?" she asked, her voice trembling with despair. The room turned against him, the air filled with tension, not toward the one who had violated his autonomy for years, but toward the one who had finally found the courage to say enough. And yet he stood his ground. Not out of defiance, but out of devotion to himself, to truth, to healing. This is the inner war every survivor faces, not just with the narcissist, but with the inner guilt that blooms from decades of conditioned loyalty. The belief that choosing yourself makes you selfish, that saying no is an act of betrayal, that protecting your peace makes you the villain in someone else's story. But guilt is not always a compass. It is often a cage. And if you are not careful, it will pull you back into the very fire you escaped from. You are not cruel for surviving. You are not heartless for healing. You are not abandoning anyone by choosing yourself. What you are doing is finally breaking the spell, stepping out of the role you were assigned and writing your own script. You are daring to see the truth and live by it, even when others are still blinded by the performance. And in doing so, you reclaim what was always yours, the right to be free. The last dirty trick is not meant to win you back. It is meant to break your growth, to test if you are still breakable, but you are not. You've outgrown the cage they kept you in. You've found your truth, your voice, your strength. And now you owe yourself loyalty above all else. Let them knock, let them cry, let them perform. You are not their audience anymore. Walk away with your head high, because the greatest revenge is not cruelty. It's clarity.